Paul and Jessica, you're up. Don't panic, Paul. You'll find it.
Carlos, I'm here to help him.
I don't do this. Well, let's see. We're going on 12. We're 11 and a half years church plant. So 11 and a half years ago, it'll be 12 coming up this September. And in the last Zoom that we did, I just kind of shared that there was nothing in our community for young families. We visited 14 or 15 churches in the surrounding area, and many would advertise as being a family church. But when we got there, it was so disconnected. And as far as the family style of worship that we were looking for our kids. So we said, I don't feel called to be a pastor, but I think we could get some families together at the YMCA gym and just start teaching about Christ. And the church was birthed from just the ambition to bring families together, to disciple, to worship, to encourage. And so now we're quite a viable church, and we're excited about that. But prior to that, I'd done children's evangelism for 26 years, I think it was. So getting my start under Norm Kalinda. I know some of you know that name. No, Norm Clothier. Norm Clothier.
Oh, yeah.
Chalk art. So I became a chalk artist, trained with him by his instructors. And then that's how I got my start doing children's programming, and met Jessica at a Church of God camp in Fenton. I was the evangelist, and well, you can imagine there's an age difference. She wanted my autograph after service, followed by a phone number. And we were married within the year, and just been excited to do ministry together.
And I would highly recommend them if any of you need a children's worker, to give them a call. All right. Jeff is he's our second child. He was born when we were pastoring on Cowpath Road. If we couldn't find him, he'd be out sitting at 3 years of age, sitting in one of the church buses like he was driving it. So, and surprisingly, Ohio State has not worn off of him. I don't know that it's safe, but anyway. So Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah. So we're in Romeo, Michigan at Orchards Community Church, and we've been here since 2003. So I think it's 17 years. And before that, I pastored a church in South Bend, Indiana for almost 7 years. Graduated from Bethel College. Shalon, my wife, and I, we've been married. Well, we got married in 1994. The Tigers did not win that year, but I still remember the year. We have 8 children. The oldest is 23, and the youngest is 8. So if you hear noises coming from the floor up above me, that's why.
Okay. He is pastoring the second church that came out of Colonial Woods. First was St. Clair. Romeo was the second, started as with a couple families in a Bible study. And so I just encourage pastors, you just never know the joy of, it seemed like you're giving away, but you're not. You are, but God replenishes, and it's just a great joy to be able to multiply. Well, since we have a couple new ones here, these classes began out of a desire for us to plant churches in West Michigan. I'm the director of the West Michigan Network. And so we have 11 churches, I guess we had 9, Carlos, churches. And this year, 21, with Pullman, we added 2. We added another Hispanic congregation in Lansing, and then we added the Pullman church plant in Pullman, Michigan. And you keep asking yourself, how are we going to plant these churches? We just don't have enough money to, just to say, hey, go ahead and start it, and we'll fund you, like $75,000 a year. So how are we going to do it? Well, we're going to have to do it with some bivocational planters. And so then the question comes, well, what do bivocational planters need? And would some get started if they had some assistance? These are not Bible classes. These are classes, just really, we've tried to take some very basic things such as, like last week, we had one on spousal buy-in. What does that mean? How do they work together? We did one on the whole tent making concept. We've done one on disciple making. Next week, Carlos is doing one on the use of the internet, how to stream your services, what are some inexpensive ways to stream, how do you advertise on the internet? So I'm excited just for myself about that class. So he'll be teaching next week. But tonight we're going to talk about music. And it's important in the local church. And some of us on this call, not all of it, but some of us have gone through the transition from, turn to page 385. Oh yeah, you don't know. You already know that song. You know the number. And let's sing that. Now there's value in that because we change songs so much now, nobody has much of a chance to learn them. And yet it's amazing how many times you find music supporting you in times of crises. So I often ask millennials, okay, so what songs would you call on in a time of need? I'm not saying they don't have them, and I'm not opposed to contemporary music at all. One of my statements is a generation that is not writing its own music is spiritually dead. They've got to write it. They've got to sing it. That's okay. I love hymns. I got probably hundreds of hymns partly memorized. Maybe the first verse and the third verse go together, but so they have to write their music. But I want us to talk tonight several different areas. One is, since this was for church planters, what if you don't have a music team? What if you don't have good musicians? You might be in a congregation that doesn't have good musicians. What do? Do you just throw something haphazard, or can you do something different? And then we're going to talk about building a farm system. I want to talk about what's the character you're looking for in your musicians. What is the role of those musicians? Now this is, you understand, this is Bill's little pet peeve. So I'm just going to share I don't call the musicians in churches that I pastored, at least the last one, I call them the music team. They are not the worship team. They're part of the worship team, but they're not the whole worship team. And sometimes we say, well, now will the worship team? Well, no, that's because maybe as a pastor, I didn't want to get left out. But do you understand my definition, my change there? It's like, hey, we're all part of the worship team. You're part of the music team. And maybe if we clarify that in people's minds, we could save ourselves some attitude issues at times. So anyway, I visited, in fact, I spoke there that Sunday, but I visited Paul and Jessica's church back in September. Wow, that long ago. And I was probably 3/4 of the way through the service, and I'm thinking, or at least the first part of it, hey, they don't have any musicians up there, except Paul was singing and Jessica, I think, was singing. Maybe they had, but they don't have any musicians. They don't have a band. I just thought, man, this is seamless. I mean, they do it well. So I thought, Paul and Jessica, talk to us. What's your philosophy? How do you do it? how can you instruct? Maybe there's somebody here tonight that's saying, hey, we really need to up some things a little bit. We'll turn it over to you. Can you find the unmute button, Paul?
I got it figured out. Just don't move the mouse and I'm good. So, well, listen, when we planted the church, mind you, we had been doing programs, Jessica and I together for 20 years. Well, not quite, been married 15 at the time or something like that. And she was always running the sound accompaniment music via CD or way back little mini disc, all the way to the era. And I was just the front man. I always called myself a puppet on her string. So whatever song she played me, I would sing it. Now I'm not a singer, although
Me neither.
we
don't sing.
We don't sing. In choir, I was in the back row and I often just mouthed the lyrics. But I found myself engaging with the kids as not to use the word wrongly, but a cheerleader. They will mimic the energy that you have. Oftentimes they'll reciprocate it. So I thought, well, let's just try this. When we gathered those families together, and they loved it. We kept it moving. I approached it more like Jessica was the DJ, the Sunday morning DJ, just mixing my tunes, and I would just lead them in worship and in song. And it was highly effective. And our church grew quickly. No one ever missed having a live band. When we first could afford a staff of the church, and I'm a volunteer, we hired a music director. And the people didn't like it, to be honest with you. The energy that we brought that was reciprocated by the crowd just kind of fell away. And he reverted to the old system of leading worship, we'll call it that. And the people weren't following him. They would stand and be entertained. He'd have a great riff on his guitar or in his keyboard, and people were just watching him perform. So after he'd been with us a little over a year, I said, listen, I want you to put your guitar down. I don't want you to lead. I just want you to serve for the next 3 weeks. I said, I don't want you behind a mic. I don't want you on the stage. Just put your guitar down, work the door, work the nursery, work kids church, help out in the youth department. And within 20 minutes of that conversation, I had his resignation on my desk. That told me a lot about the character of the person, that he was about the performance and not the active engagement of leading people into worship, into the presence of God, into singing joyous songs. He was just there for himself. And people were disconnected from him. And so when we finally agreed to let him go after 6 weeks, you're not going to give me 2 weeks. You're going to fill 6 weeks because you have nowhere to go. I'll take care of you.
And your family.
And your family. After he left, the congregation were, what's the word, belated? They're actually glad he was gone, to be honest with you.
Relieved.
They were relieved. They were relieved that we could go back to that style of worship,
Family worship
that we had once done.
Yeah.
So our approach was, as you experienced, Pastor Bill, that we kept it moving and flowing. The transitions were flawless, almost as seamless. Like you said, you'd sat there for quite some time and you realized, wait a minute, where's the band? Where's the worship team or the music team? It's not there. It's absent. And we didn't approach it like, again, the traditional and typical worship set that a normal church does, because we're not normal. A normal church will open with 6 songs, repeat 2 of them 3 times. And we're like, all right, we've already been here 35 minutes. Now we're going on 40. When's the transition happening? And we're losing the kids because our kids are with us for the worship service. And they're falling out like flies. And so we would open with a fast song, kind of a wake me up, get everybody engaged, do our little greeting directly and immediately following that. And then back into 2 songs, never more than 2. So an opener, a greeting time, maybe a quick announcement if needed for something based on the events of that service, but then into 2 songs, and then we're done. Now, people who would visit our church go, wait a minute, where was the worship? Because we did praise. Isn't this praise and worship? We would always do the worship at the end because we're already going to sing at the end, aren't we? We give a challenge, we offer a response to the message or something, and we always end with 1, if not 2, slower, more worshipful songs. So why put those worshipful songs
Take up more
prior to
time.
the message. When I want to keep that attentiveness and energy moving, we did this, you know, more active audience engagement of praise music. And then before you know it, I'm into my message. And the people, you know, they didn't skip a beat and they didn't miss the worship because it came at the end as their hearts have been challenged by the word, or there's been a call to respond or some type of thing. So we spend and have more time at the end of service as opposed to feeling rushed out because, oh, the pastor went long. Well, if I went long and it's early in the service. So we weren't running out of time. We would do more of a worship set at the end, many times 2 songs, having to repeat one if necessary. So, but I approach it very much like the DJ on the mixer. You know the flow of the service. You give me what I need.
Usually let them know that we do motions to our songs, you know, for only Pastor Bill knows because he's been there, but we sing your current songs or whatever, praise and worship. I grab YouTube, I grab whatever. And we do put motions with almost every song we sing, not even the whole song or maybe the chorus, because it helps kids get involved. And that being when we hired our music pastor, he knew that that was a requirement. Like we do family worship. This is what our church would build up to over 100 people at to start. So coming in, you know, this is what you have to do. And it's just not comfortable for him to do those kind of things. So we do have fun. We do have fun.
Okay, tell me, to help us, some YouTube stuff just doesn't look really good. And I don't know that I don't think you use the video portion of it. Primarily you use the audio portion, I think. Maybe you use some video, I'm trying to recall. So how do you select, and I'm sure you've been able to hone some of those skills through your years of children's ministries, but where do you get your music? How do you blend it? Like you said, she's a DJ. How do you make it flow smoothly and nicely?
Oh, how we do it.
I don't know how you do it. That's why I had to bring her on tonight.
Yeah.
I don't know how she does it. All I say is, whatever you play me, I'll sing it.
Okay. So I use Pro Presenter currently.
Okay, explain Pro Presenter for some of us.
Carlos, Pro Presenter, like Media Shout.
ProPresenter is like a PowerPoint, but you already have your PowerPoints right there, and you can administrate everything to show in the screen.
Okay, so
you can have videos, photos, and everything.
Yeah, with Pro Presenter, I was, again, because we don't have any band, I'm able to put my song in, and then for our greeting time, click a track that just blends right through by itself. The track is for the knuckle bumping that we do, and then it blends into a track for our praise and worship, blend into another track of our announcements, into our family challenge. So Pro Presenter is really nice because it automatically fades for those of us who don't have good sound people on the keyboard to get that blended nicely. Pro Presenter does that for me they just click the button. I do just go wherever I buy tunes from YouTube or iTunes. Sometimes I strip them from YouTube and put them in. When looking for music, I have to find things that are not like 7 minutes. It's a challenge to find music because I don't have a band. I can't say, let's sing that song again, or, you know, or let me talk in the middle, play this bridge so I can, you know, elaborate here. So it's really hard to find music that I personally like men leading, because I want our men and dads to, I feel like they just participate better than a woman leading vocals. So I try to find tracks that have the men singing and not a lot of break time in the middle, not choruses that are easy for kids to memorize it. So not lengthy stuff, but that fits for my church. Yeah. You know what I mean? For my demographic of my families. I mean, we're 50% under the age of 12.
Yeah. Do you use the video portion?
I drop in videos, backdrops. I just, in Pro Presenter, you can pick a backdrop.
And you can set your lyrics to the timing of the song.
So once it's
once it's all recorded, I call it's in the can, it's ready to fire. So just fire me, name a song.
Lord, I lift your name on high.
Lord, I lift your name on high. Fire me that song. Well, it's already done, so it doesn't take anyone superiorly trained in Pro Presenter to hit the button of that song. and it fades right into it. And then again, when it's done, it'd fade out into the next song. But what she said there is interesting. We didn't talk about it before we come on tonight, but having a man lead, and especially in our congregation of young fathers who have never been to church.
Yeah.
And to have a woman lead, I've often noticed in the traveling that I've done, the men often are the less likely to engage in praise and worship. You know, the women jump in, the women sing loud, the women are engaged, they're emotionally connected to the song, and the men are just kind of loafing. They're standing just loafing. But when they say me, and I'm 50, and I'm doing the motions to a song, and I'm singing with 110%, and I'm encouraging them as I go, I find them mirroring me, but at 70%.
Right.
Well, I'll take 70% over 20. And that's what I typically see in most churches is these men just not engaging in worship or in song. So I think it's important that, again, based on your demographic, that you show yourself to be one who they want to emulate to be. And that's key. And our kids often help us on stage. That's what Jessica didn't mention on that too, is our music team are, sometimes we call them praisers, those who come and help us sing. They're kids. One little girl, foster kid, came from a very abusive background, and you would think she'd amount to nothing. I know her family, I know her mother, and just a terrible situation. Well, she's closing out our service and worship songs, and she's only
10.
10.
Mhm.
So she's 10 years old, and she's closing out our worship service. And these people just,
Wow.
they love it. They love to see a child lead. So,
Okay, we're gonna switch gears. I want to bring Jeff in a little bit. Jeff has he has a worship leader. They usually have about 6 to 8 people on the platform: drum, several guitars, keyboard, synthesizer, lead singer. And he said last time I talked with him, he said they have about 35 people in a rotation. His daughter told me about 45 now. So somewhere between 35 to 45 people are available and are used in a rotation. But before we get there, Jeff, I want to talk about character. What do you look for when you are finding people to serve? What are you looking for in their character, in their personality?
Yeah. Well, and I guess I would echo some of what Paul and Jessica stated, that this is, I can only share from our context what has worked for us. And I know that it won't be the same for everybody. But as far as character, one of the things that we've really felt is most important is humility. I don't see how somebody can be a good, godly leader if there's not a great humility there. And so really we're looking for what's the posture of this person's heart. The lady who's currently leading our worship or music ministry, depending on who you ask, is she's been doing it for about 5 years. The first couple years she was just a volunteer doing it, but at the time that we were looking for somebody, we had 3 different people in our congregation that were kind of being considered. And she, from a musical standpoint, experience standpoint, she was the least qualified at that time of the 3 that we were considering. But the posture of her heart, the humility, the character was exactly what we were looking for. And so part of what we've done is that we've made a value choice or a priority choice that we're gonna always choose character over competency. Now we want competency too, but character's gonna come first. So, but I'd say humility is probably the top thing that we're looking for.
Okay. Can I just tell you a brief story? Let me just interject this. You talk about character. I was on a flight out of Fort Wayne or somewhere, I forget where it was now. And I sat down beside a guy, and he had, it looked like an official, kind of an official jacket from the San Diego Chargers football team. And so I engaged him in discussion, conversation. And I said to him I said, what do you do? What's your job? He said, I'm a line coach for the San Diego Chargers, defensive line coach. I said to him, I said, what do you look for in a lineman? And I'm thinking size, speed, meanness, you know. The first thing out of his mouth was this: we look for character. I was kind of blown back. He said, we want these guys, yeah, we want them to speed, but we want them to be teachable. We want them to have the right heart and have good conduct. And I think, wow, can you, I just never thought a football team like that would be looking for character. Okay. All right. So we're looking for humility. Paul and Jessica, you use some people on your platform with you. What are you looking for?
A smile. That's what we look for.
Yeah.
A smile and being able to engage. And you have to want to be up there, you know. And participation, you have to do motions. Sorry.
And I think, again, when like a father or male in the congregation sees me singing, they're more off or apt to sing. That's why we have kids on stage. So when those kids are singing, the kids in the congregation are singing. So our crowd, the competency is rarely there. But again, we're singing to tracks. So, and if from the sound booth or the DJ booth, that person's singing too loud and a little out of key, we just bring them down. They don't even know it. And they just keep singing. Their smile is from ear to ear. I mean, they pour 100% into it. So we look for again, the characters definitely key, but
yeah, we don't let people on stage that would be questionable in their walk.
yeah, we have those who want to sing on stage. They're, you know, co-inhabiting and some different things. And we're like, you know, no, this is not the place for you to serve. But if they're willing to put in the effort, the energy, the time, the love, the passion for it, they're not. Our crowd is, again, very young, and I would say 80% unchurched. They didn't grow up singing hymns in a seat with grandma teaching them harmony.
Okay.
So we do our best.
Can I just tell them what we did,
No,
please?
no, go ahead.
Yeah, because we don't do hymns and a lot of people didn't grow up on them, I decided for this year we were going to do a hymn a month. So our offering song is a hymn, and we have a guy who introduces it. It's not Paul and I, and he will sing it to a track because he can sing. And we don't do it on the screen. I found hymnals, and I've handed out hymnals, and they gather around a hymnal, and we're teaching them how to learn to sing to the hymnal, to sing harmony. And he talks parts, and he talks about where the hymn came from, and our people are eating it up.
They have never heard hymns before.
Yeah, it's been great.
They're like, what is this book?
Yeah, it's been awesome.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Okay, which leads me to out of what you've said, what is the role of a worship leader, music worship leader? What do you, they will be successful when? Jeff, why don't we go with you? I don't think these were on some of the questions that I asked you guys or sent to you, but I'll let you wing it. So how is this person that's leading the music part of your worship, how are they successful?
Well, I mean, I guess the way that we look at it is that not just the main leader, but the whole team, that they're successful if they're able to lead the congregation in worship.
What's that mean?
Well, meaning that if the music sounds great and everything was on key and everyone hit every right note, but the people didn't engage in worship, then they didn't do their job.
So you're saying it's not a performance.
Right. No. And part of what we've tried to do over the years, and we've struggled with worship at different times. Had times when when we had no worship team, no musicians. And so but part of what we've tried to do over the years is to teach the congregation, what their role is during that time, and that they're not spectators, they're not the audience, that God is the audience. And so I like sports, so I use sports analogies, and I tell our worship team, our music team, that they're like the manager or the coach, and their role is to put the players, which would be our congregation, in the best possible position to succeed. And so that's how we look at it: is were we able to engage the congregation in worship? Were they participating? If they weren't, then that wasn't a success.
Okay. Paul, Jessica, you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, that's exactly what I would have said is, from stage, I know if I've gone, let's say one song too many in my lineup, if 5 kids have left their seats and they've disappeared or there's a distraction, I'm like, they're not engaged. We've lost them somewhere, somehow. And what was it? So that's why Jessica's so key in trying to put that song selection together in such a way to where, like you experienced, Pastor Bill, you didn't even know the time had passed. Like, wow, all of a sudden we're 2/3 the way in, and what's going on here? And so the fluidity of the program, how it moves, how you engage the audience, and where you're taking them to, I think is what I would look for. That's what I attempt to do every Sunday, because I lead the worship every Sunday. So it's hard for me to say what I'm looking for, because I'm looking in the mirror. That's what I do every single Sunday. From the moment they start the countdown till we give the benediction, I'm on the stage the whole time.
I had a really good question, and it just popped right out. Steve, you don't understand. You're way too young to understand anything about that. Oh, I know what it is. One of the things that sometimes not just musicians, it can be any, is that they don't like new people coming in. This is my area. This is my turf. Don't come in. But if you are building a congregation and it's growing, you will have new people who come in who have talent. In fact, they have more talent and ability, and even maybe a better heart than the people right now occupying up on stage. How do you train your people? How do you train your team to integrate these new people who want to serve into that music program? Or do you? Or do you just have a select few?
Bill, could I interject something here? Just from the standpoint of taking a risk to say this, I think one of the difficulties is that musicians by nature are a different breed. So what happens is when there is a sense of humility, and let's say somebody doesn't have all of the talent, but they have a big heart. If they've got the heart, new people don't threaten them. They're happy to bring them on board. I think what happens is, and this is just my own personal opinion, when there's an attitude problem and an ego involved, and many times with musicians, you got to fight that because they like the applause, they like to be the center of attention, they like the pat on the back, they're up front, they're in the spotlight, so to speak, and it feeds them, and it can feed them. When there's a problem with attitude, it's deeper than that. And again, I personally, I've seen it go both ways. And sometimes, in light of pastoral leadership, since it's kind of my baby, so to speak, sometimes it's a juggling thing just to try to keep personalities in check. And so, but again, the thing I appreciate tonight is that every church probably represented in this format have a different style, but we're really talking about the same kinds of things. We're talking about humility. We're talking about engaging people rather than performance. We've all seen that. And I think that's where it gets tragic. But again, it's the heart issue again in regard to new people getting involved.
Is it, hey, Steve, is it also, and for the others, is it part of training our leadership that we are a growing congregation, and a growing congregation has to integrate new people? And I tell, and is it the truth that pastors get the big bucks to know how to integrate the two groups?
I don't know. I don't know about the big bucks. It's there's a lot of theory being discussed here, but when it comes to on a Sunday morning, it becomes a whole different. Many times it's a whole different deal. And about the time you think you got it figured out, you get blindsided.
Okay. Jeff, you want to respond to some of this interchange here?
Yeah, well, I think Steve's right. Humility is key. So that's part of it. I think part of what has helped us is the way that we've approached our ministry leaders. So we let them know that they're first and foremost shepherds in their roles. So whatever their ministry leadership role, their primary function is to shepherd the people that are under their care in their ministry team. And so I think that's important because it changes the way that they see maybe their role. And so that's been helpful for us. One of the things that we've tried to do is we don't have like separate teams, music teams. We just rotate people. So there's a different mix of people all the time. So I think that helps in integrating new people, because it's not like, well, we have our five and we're always together. And what are they doing trying to put this new person together with us? Because there's a constant rotation. And it also helps avoid, congregational favorites like, oh, I hope, my favorite group is playing today. And so.
I might just share, Bill, just a couple of things that
Yeah.
I have been engaged in over my years in ministry is with anybody who I've asked to sing a solo or be part of a group or choir or whatever. And I've gotten positive feedback on these, is that I constantly am talking with people, the people who are involved in the music ministry. I refer to them as music ministers, and they are as important as the minister who's giving the sermon or the minister who's playing the instrument or whatever. But we're all ministers, and that's what we're being called to do, and to use the gifts and the talents that God's given us. And I constantly, once we select a song, I pick it apart. I ask them to pick it apart so they understand truly what this song is about, first of all, that we're singing, and then minister what that song is, what we're saying through that song, musically. And I think again, I've had the feedback, the people who have been in my choirs, I've been in the churches where I've served music, is that's what they continually share with me about the appreciation is I've taught them or ministered to them in a way that engaged them to be ministers with me. And they look at the songs that they sing and that we sing in services and or a choir. Uh, and I tell them, if you're worshiping while you're singing, it's going to be contagious, and others, the Lord will use that, and the Spirit will use that to have others join us in that time of worship.
Sure, sure.
So, and I was really excited when you told me Jeff had 35 people that rotate through. I think that's phenomenal. That's probably a key thing right there. Again, I've witnessed a number of different churches where their praise team is the same 6 to 12 people, and after a while, they all become performers. Not intentionally, but it happens.
Sure.
And I again, what Steve has shared about the ego and how important humility is and just different things, we've got to constantly be reminding them, that's my job, to be their minister of music and ministry. And so I'm constantly leading them through that and reminding them that that's what we're doing. But I lied. What size is your congregation, Jeff, that you have 35 people rotating through?
Right now it's about 270, 300.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's super. But I just wanted to share that as that thought there. But I really like that what you were just discussing, Bill, and the whole idea that since we're growing, we need to involve others who, first of all, maybe even been called,
Sure.
who have certainly been given the talent, that to be used to give God glory. And that's, again, Jesus said, go and do it. And that's what we need to
Sure.
be about as musicians.
I think, thanks, Don. I think one of the things also I've heard that you all talk about to some degree, and Paul, I think you probably spoke most strongly to it, that is observation. What you said, if I see 5 kids walk out, somehow I've lost something. And I'm wondering if we need to do more to teach our music leaders. You need to observe what's going on in the congregation, because if they're not worshiping, I hate to say this, if they're not worshiping, you probably haven't done your job. You're putting on a performance, but you're not bringing them along with you. And I think there are some ways to do that, particularly in an older congregation. You can sing some of the praise, and I love some of the praise music. Please understand me, I love it. But I'll sometimes say to these young kids who are up front, now I want you to observe when we go to a hymn like How Great Thou Art, you observe the volume level. You observe the participation. I mean, it's incredible. It's like, guys, when you preach, when you tell an illustration, all of a sudden, the people who were thinking about what they were going to have for lunch, or what they're going to be doing on Monday, you've immediately got them back looking at you. Okay, and that's what, so I think teaching them to observe what's happening out there. I want to talk about building. Keith, were you going to say something?
Yeah. I think one of the things that probably is the 2 hardest jobs in the church is that of the pastor and that of the person who's leading the worship. You've got people who are not Christians, you've got baby Christians, you've got maturing Christians, you've got veteran Christians, and when you get done, they all have to have the maximum they can from it. You're depending on the Spirit of God to do that, but you've got to do your thing too. And I agree 100% with reading the congregation. If there's something that's not right, you need to have Plan B under your belt and ready to go, and change gears a little bit.
At least.
I serve in two churches here. One is go ahead.
No, go ahead, Keith.
Okay, I serve in two churches here. One is it's everybody's over 65 in the park where we live. Okay, so we do the hymns. Not a lot of praise songs. We do the hymns because that's what they know. On the other church, we have a combination of stuff. It's a little church that was dead for about 20 years and starting to come alive. And one of the things that I'm doing, because I'm not really good at children's stuff, but I took the songs that I learned as a kid and reintroduced them to these kids, and then put them in front of the people and teach them to the people from the kids. It's electrifying. And the funny part is, on our Singspirations, the songs that the people ask for are the songs that they're learning from the kids.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Appreciate that. One of the things I want to talk about is, are you a talent scout? I think pastors need to be talent scouts for a variety of things. I think we always have to have our antennas up to find those people who have gifts and abilities that we need to help get engaged in various areas of ministry. Anybody want to respond? Or is that just Bill's thing?
Oh, no, I will on this one. We've had no talent, zero, until just recently. And the guy that we're having lead the hymns, apparently the church he came from, he was in a band, and quite a good and successful band that performed at other churches and did some concert venues. And he goes, "Yeah, I play the keyboard, well, and the guitar and the drums." I said, "No, wait a minute, wait. Oh yeah, and my son-in-law, he plays the drums and the guitar." And all of a sudden he's giving me names of the people who were in the congregation that I didn't know had talent. And they had come in the last, let's say 18 months, no more than 2 years. And then of course COVID hit, so we shut down, but I was in the process. And they don't have their own equipment. So I'm like, listen, I will buy or find a drum set. I'll find a guitar and an amp. I'll look around. I'll solicit people for the instruments we might need. And we'll start you guys at least in the worship end towards the end of the service, because there's a little more flexibility there, and a little more room for hiccups if you're going to have them. And so I'm about ready to engage that once again, beginning to look for some instruments or even purchase some through some savings that we have, because it'll give them an opportunity to do ministry that way. But in the recruiting, I wanted to mention this earlier too, and this fits in that same thing, is I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but if the Luciferian spirit is going to enter your church, it typically does through the worship. I've seen it over and again in the church that I've worked with, because again, back to the performance part, there's pride attached to that. There's arrogance attached to that. There's this emotional connection the worship minister has with the congregation, to where they know they can, what's the word, lull or sway or move the crowd of the congregation the way they want them to go. And before you know it, they are placed on that pedestal, as Lucifer was, like, look at me, full of his arrogance and pride, and a third of the angels fell with him. And you see a lot of church splits, and a lot of that turmoil happened within the worship department or the music department, because of that leader begins to look at the crowd and says, "Look what I was able to do through the music I led. I had people on their feet, hands raised, tears in their eyes, falling on their knees, just in 45 minutes to an hour of worship. Oh, and then pastor, if you'd like, you could speak for 28 minutes, no more than 32, because we got to get out of here for lunch." So the imbalance of time is often there. That's why we balance our time so well in our service, to where we give just amount of time and allocation to reading God's word, engaging in, let's call it sacraments or parts of the service, as we do in the worship aspect. So if you look at the service in thirds, a third is music, a third is active engagement, involvement, and then a third is studying God's word. So there's equal time given to each one of what we believe are the key functions of the church, so that no one gets on their high and mighty horse saying, look what I was able to do. And I've seen church splits and 2/3 of the people leave with the worship pastor because he's starting a church up the road. And here's this man of God who knows the word, who's well studied and commits himself to delivering it every week, is stuck, starting over. So I've seen that happen. So back to the character thing and how we recruit, the humility, to say what Jeff said earlier. Where's your heart? Is your heart to serve the people, no matter where on this given Sunday you happen to be, whether behind a microphone or changing diapers? We want you to demonstrate the love that you have for Christ to others. And then if it happens to be through singing, playing some drums, so be it. But we want you to have that heart to worship throughout the entire church, not just on stage.
Bill,
Go ahead.
the thing I think that, and I appreciate Paul's comment there. I think in response to your statement about being a talent scout, I think the thing that I've learned and continue to have to remind myself is Steve, go slow. Sometimes I've made quick decisions because the talent has been off the charts. And I get burned. And whenever you get burned, you lose people. And it doesn't take somebody with a lot of talent to bring a network of people around them. And if they get their feelings hurt and they're gone, it's always going to cost you, some people. So I guess one of the things I've learned is just go slow. I think the other thing that I want to interject, and maybe this isn't the time, and Bill, you can change it. I have grown really tired of the mentality that says we've got to take the top 10 songs in Song Select or CCLI, and we're going to sing the top 10 songs that America or the world is using because those are the songs of worship. One of the things that I've tried to do, and sometimes it's not easy, but I've explained it to people because it takes them out of what they like sometimes. In other words, they all have their favorite song, if they're churched at all. And again, in Paul and Jessica's situation, it's a little different maybe, but if somebody's been at all around church, they have their favorite songs. And sometimes they would be very, very comfortable for people to come in on a Sunday. And as long as we're singing their favorite songs, they're happy. My problem is that I look at the whole worship experience on Sunday as basically very thematic. In other words, if I'm preaching on grace, then let's sing about grace. And if that includes an older song or that includes a newer song, let's take the best of what's available that would engage the hearts of people and use that. Now, somebody may not like it, but if it's theologically sound and it's singable, not all the hymns are, and I grew up with hymn books, so I get it. But not every one of those songs in a hymnal were singable. They were hard to sing. And so I just kind of feel like there's a science involved. There's a psychological bent involved. And I think it's often more difficult than people assume it to be. It isn't a matter of, throwing a couple of songs on the forefront. You're on the order of service or whatever you want to call it, building a set and saying, well, these are the current songs, and they make no sense in light of flow. And I guess what I was hoping for ultimately, that on a Sunday, if somebody walks out of the service and somebody asks them at lunch, you go to church today? Yeah. What was the service about? That the whole service, music and message, incorporated that particular idea, as opposed to it being piecemeal. I'm done.
Okay.
I will shut
All right.
up.
Thanks, Steve. Hey, I want Jeff, I'd like you to respond to two things. I'd like you to respond to the subject of team building. And then, but I also want you to talk about, and I recognize, and I've always been hesitant to do this, and that's to push the family to the forefront. But I will say that Jeff, at the Romeo Church, they have the best farm system I have ever seen in a local church. You know, if you have 35 people in rotation that are right now on the platform, and then you have a whole nother tier below that of trainees in a junior setting. And we're talking, well, I know they do talent shows once or twice a year. And I think they did it to 2 different settings because, you know, it's one thing to come and listen to my son sing, but I don't know if I want to sit there for another 30 kids. So let's break this down into 15. I can endure 14 others. You understand what I'm saying? So Jeff, 2 things. Respond about when you hire staff, looking for team members, team leaders, and the whole farm system.
Yeah, so for team building, I'm not sure if I understand you completely, but again, it would be character. It's character first, whether that's a volunteer ministry leader or a paid staff person. It's character first.
Well, and I know I said, yeah, I want you to say my words, but you know, when for example, when you hire your music leader, you don't want, you weren't looking for her to just do it all by herself. For those of you who may have or don't, or may have staff in the future, you cannot pay a person to do just one job by himself or herself. If they are not team builders, you can't use them. You can't afford them. And so to me, when he hires say a music leader, she's got to build teams. She's got to build a team. We don't hire her just to perform. Okay, but talk about that, and then also about your farm system.
Yeah, so with I guess I can honestly say I didn't know if she'd be able to build a team. I'm thankful that she's been able to. I think we tried to make sure that we cast that vision with her and ongoing. That she, you know, we didn't hire her to do it all, but to again shepherd this area of ministry and these people. And so I guess that's what I'd say on that. And just a real quick history for me, and kind of, you know, we talked about the farm system a little bit, but so at the first church that I pastored in South Bend, we went there and there were 38 people at the church, 17 board members out of that 38 people. That's legitimate. That's not I'm not exaggerating that. But we had no musical talent, none. And this was before YouTube was, you know, had stuff available. So we did all, and I called around to other local missionary churches. Hey, do you have a piano player that maybe is not quite good enough for your Sunday morning, but could, you know, come to our church once a month? And nobody had anybody. And so that always stuck with me. So we tried, you know, they had back then I think they're called MIDI machines, MIDI, MIDI machines, you know, band in a box or whatever. So we tried all sorts of stuff. And then when we came to Romeo, we were a church of about 90 people at that time. After a couple of years, we had an issue with our worship team because we had gone too quickly. In my defense, it was before I got there, but that doesn't matter. They had been put into position too quickly. There was an issue. the whole worship team plus anybody connected with them left the church. So we lost 30 people out of 90, and we had nothing. So we did I worship DVDs. We did all sorts of things to just continue to engage in worship. But through those experiences, God really put a burden on my heart that we would be a place that would train people in the area of music ministry, so that when our young people went out and settled wherever they will, as adults, that the local churches that they land in, that they would be able to contribute to the music ministry in that church. And so that was something that I began praying for probably 12, 13 years ago, was that God would develop that in our church. And probably about 8 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, I'd continued to pray, and God had provided musicians for us and things like that, but there wasn't the kind of the training that was taking place that I'd wanted. And God brought a family to the church, a wonderful older couple, Joe, and Joe and I were talking, and I just kind of shared with him, some of my heart on this in the area of music. And he said, well, he said, I teach piano, and he said, and I teach voice. He said, do you think, God might be wanting us to do something? And I said, I sure hope so, but let's take some time to think about it and pray about it. And so what grew out of that is that this gentleman, he's at our church Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, all day, those 3 days. He's teaching children and young people and adults from our church on keyboard and voice. And so that's really kind of how our talent gets developed. And part of what's happened, I think, is that we've, through all this, a culture has been created among our congregation, and we have a young congregation, lots of young families, lots of children, lots of young people, but where our congregation is used to having younger people up on the platform engaged in worship. And so it's something that our children, they see these young people that are, a few years ahead of them. They see them up on the platform engaging in worship, and it's just developed this culture of that's what the kids want to do. They want to be a part of that's what's normal to them. But it really started with a heart that I wanted to see our young people be prepared and equipped so that whatever local church they ended up in, they'd be prepared to help out in some way.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. We have about 7 minutes, and I want us to maybe just open it up and let you ask other questions. Some of you maybe have some questions. You've been a little hesitant to jump in. This is an opportunity for that. A question or a comment?
I
Yeah.
have some. I'd
Go
like
ahead,
to.
Nick.
Of all the things in ministry, this is the most daunting to me. Not that I've never been taught to preach, but I figure I can probably kind of self-teach myself more of that. I'm not musically inclined. And I realize it's extremely important because being on leadership in our church, we read through Who Stole My Church, and I don't know if that's the book. They talked about worship wars, and I thought, then I talked with, because Pastor Jim was our pastor at that time. I said, so does anybody ever complain? He says, all the time. Some people complain we sing too many hymns, some too many choruses. He says, when everybody's complaining on each side, I figure we're doing something right. And I've realized, a lot of time when I come out of church and say, it just didn't sit right with me today. I try and ask myself, is it me? Did I not get enough sleep? Did the kids have too much issues before church? So I'm just thinking about that. Do I have too much work going on so I can't get my mind into it? Or was it actually the worship off? And most of the time I figure it's me. But this year was a little different year because everybody experienced that. Bart was in quarantine, and we do caroling. And so since I'm, what is it, vice chair and desiring to serve God, I said, okay, I'll take people around and we'll carol. Well, there was my wife and I and 5 of our kids and our granddaughter and a family of 3. And usually we got 25 or 30 people, and we caravan around, and it was really difficult because I can't sing, I can't harmonize, and I can't carry a tune in a bucket. But I realized 12 or 15 years ago when we started doing this caroling that it just blesses the socks off people. To see people that we go to church with every week crying because people came out enough, desired enough to see them be blessed. Because sometimes we just don't know what's going on in people's lives. And God's word put to music is it's a phenomenal thing. And I just, Jeff, do you sing or do you not?
Well, it depends on how you define that term.
Did you sing on the platform?
No, I don't. Now,
Okay.
at our previous church, there were Christmas Eve services where I led the Christmas carols, not because I wanted to or had any visions of glory, but just because that's what was available. So, no, I don't, I mean, no, that's not where I'm gifted. And that's okay. But as you were talking, I was reminded of another point, and I think Paul and Jessica, I don't know if I heard you speak on it, maybe Jessica last week on the call, but I think one thing that's really important is to know who you are as a church and to be okay with that. Because there are lots of churches in our area that probably have better worship, and that's okay. We know we're not the church for everybody, but to just be who God's called us to be. And so that means that like this week I got an email from somebody who visited, and they had some helpful contributions to make to what kind of church we should be. And and you want to listen, but then I can just with grace and confidence just say thanks for your input, but I know that's not who we are. So I think that's important too.
Good. Somebody else comment. Joel, you got anything? You've been rather reserved tonight.
I guess, and others have touched on this already. And I think Paul said it well when he said he has no talent. Now I know he has talent personally, but within the congregation, they have no talent, or they're just starting to discover it. I think we probably put too much emphasis on talent and programming. And like I said, everybody's already hinted at this or flat out said it, but if it is true, and I believe it to be so, that God initiates worship, then as we come together as congregations, we are going to be worshiping Him, and whether the music is good or not, frankly, in my experience, a lot of times we worship better when the talent isn't there. As when I was in Cass City, I was the youth pastor there, and I was lucky enough to have a group of students most of the time I was there that we had a student band, and they did everything. They decided what songs they were going to sing. They learned the songs. The only thing I did was sit back there and hit the button on Pro Presenter to flip the slides forward. That's all I did. That was my contribution to it. And they were fantastic. Well, coming into this COVID year, 4 of the 5 band members were graduating, which it was great. I had them all together for all that time, but they were graduating. We only had 1 left. So I was working on the previous year, bringing new people in to fill that role. Well, with COVID, that all fell apart. So over this past summer, then my oldest son, who wanted to learn guitar but was kind of afraid to do so, I bought him a guitar, and I had one that I bought at a garage sale 15 years ago that I've never touched. He and I just started working on it together, and we learned 2 songs. And all summer long with the youth group, he and I led worship. I probably sing about as well as Nick does. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter. Everybody we're just, and part of it was the COVID environment, and we were together. We were outdoors the whole time. So we were just happy to be together. We were happy to have an opportunity to worship God. And so, like I said, all that got said already. But you don't have to have talent in order to lead others in music. And God's going to find that. And that's, if our hearts are right, which we've been talking about that a lot, it's going to glorify Him. And if it glorifies Him, frankly, I don't really care what it sounds like. And so, I don't know. I guess you asked me to comment. So that's
right.
my comment is why do we waste so much time and energy trying to make it perfect when the basic tenet of our faith tells us that none of us are.
Yeah. Thanks, Joel. And it's time for us to wrap up, and I try to honor your time schedules. Let me just say that, Nick, I want to respond to your comment about you don't feel like you can sing, and I think that's where it's really important that pastors recognize they are talent scouts, that you may not have the ability, nor I think Moses could have handled all the positions, but God said, Moses, you need to build teams. You can't do it by yourself. Build a team. And I think that's where I want to give you an example. Carlos will know this. There was a gentleman at my last church who was in the sound booth. That was his niche. Well, I found out that he used to play drums. So I said to him, so why don't you play for us sometime? We needed a drummer. Nah, I don't. And somebody else said, no, he doesn't want to play. He said he didn't want to play. But the more I talk to him, you begin to see that seed down there that says, I really do want to play, but I don't feel like maybe I'm good enough. But I continue to encourage him because you see into that heart. And today he's playing the drums where Carlos is playing the guitar or whatever, the bass or whatever Carlos chooses to play that Sunday. And it was all because a guy said, no, I don't really want to, but you could see in his heart, he really did want to. So that's where I think we have to be talent scouts. We have to find those people who have that desire to serve, but they just need to be encouraged to develop it. All right, Carlos, what can we expect next week? I know that you may not be fully developed, but I want you to tell us again, what can we expect next week from your presentation?
We're gonna expect to have take advantage of the internet. I know well, I don't know how many of you, but I know most of you use the internet to connect to the people, especially because pandemic. I know pastors that it was how you say this? They were not friends with any social medias in the past because that was evil thing. But now they're friends and they're learning how to use it. So we're gonna see how we can get the most advantage of using social medias as a preaching or sharing the word, and also which tools we can use to do a better job streaming, and also connecting with small groups through using WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, and some other things. So
Okay, that's next week. Carlos will do a good job for you. So I trust you'll be back. We're excited about it. Any other announcements we need to make that maybe I've forgotten? Jeff, Paul, and Jessica, thank you so much for being our panelists tonight and helping us as we firm up some of our thoughts. Encourage us to make some of the right decisions, look for the right people, create the right atmosphere in our worship through music. Thank you all for joining us. Hey, Steve Beagle, would you be willing to close in a word of prayer with us? You make sure you're unmuted.
Absolutely. Lord, when we think about it, we recognize that while we're here on earth, we're just practicing.
Mm-hmm.
And you deserve our best while we're practicing. And we look forward to one of these days in glory. And recognize that what we do here won't hold a candle to the significance of engaging and bringing honor and glory to you. Might that be the bent of our heart. Might that be our passion. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen.
Nice
Thank
to meet
everybody.
you guys.
Yep. God bless you. Have a great week.
Hey, Bill, the snow's about gone. Just want you to know.
Oh, good, Steve.
Isn't that something?
I was
It's gone.